failure should inspire you to get smarter. Unfortunately, our school system says, if you fail, you're stupid. That is not true, Speed. There's no such thing as a bad economy, and the willpower is to change our internal economy. So for me, I can see the good, Speed, and I can see the bad. I don't really give a damn, because I'm going to be rich anyway. But a poor person, Speed, with a poor personal economy, all they're going to see is a bad economy. He says you have to look at the big picture. Too many people look at, well, what's going to happen to me? When you look at the big picture, you're also going to know that when something bad happens, something good is going to happen. Speed. But you've got to prepare for whatever is coming. If you think the next 20 years will be like the last 20 years, you're going to get creamed. You know, when you, and I go to the supermarket and we buy a carton of milk, we always check for the expiration date, but most people do not check for the expiration date on their brains, because the school system never teaches you about money. The school system was designed to teach you to be an employee, Speed, which is important, or a doctor or a lawyer, a specialist, but never about money. You've really got to understand what is risky and what is not risky. And in my world, if you play it safe, that makes you stupid, because if you don't take risks, you don't get smarter. And when somebody says, what is risk? You have to look in the mirror, you know what I mean? For me, to fly in Vietnam, that was high risk. But the higher the risk, the more you have to study. You know that. I know that. Well, first of all, everybody can do something, but they won't. And that's the problem. The point is, everybody can do something, but you've got to figure out what you can do. Poor people say, I can't afford it. I can't do that. I don't have time, because it's an escape. It's an escape. I remember raising my hand when I was 9 years old, talking to my 4th grade teacher. I said, Speed, when am I going to learn about money? And she was this woman who should have retired 50 years earlier. Speed. She was so sick and tired of kids by this time. And she said, we don't teach money at school. I said, why not? And she couldn't answer me. She got very flustered and said, sit down. Take your seat. Then I got curious. I said, why don't we learn about money? I went home and asked my dad, why don't we learn about money in school? And he looked at me and said, because the government doesn't let us teach that subject. The government tells us what we can teach and what we can't teach. And I thought that was strange. I said, but aren't we going to school to learn about money? He said, no, your job is to get a job. I said, but you get a job to earn money. He said, no, you're supposed to just get a job. I went, no. Speed, isn't the purpose of a job to earn money? He said, you're correct. I said, so why don't I just learn about money? Speed, I can skip the job part. And he got flustered. My father, who was Japanese, very tall, 6'4", an imposing man, guy finally said, if you want to learn about money, why don't you ask your best friend's father about money? Why? He said, Pete, because Mike's father is an entrepreneur. What are you? He said, I'm an employee. I'm a government employee. I went, what's the difference? He said, this is the difference. Pete, an entrepreneur must know about money, or they're no longer entrepreneurs. Pete, an employee doesn't have to know anything about money, because the government will take care of them. The company will take care of them. Finally, through persistence, my rich dad started teaching me about money on one condition. And that condition was he would never pay me. He said, the moment I pay you, you think like an employee. That's the trap. Entrepreneurs work for free. And now I'm 9 years old, and my head's cracking in half. He said, you never want a paycheck. You understand that, kid? I said, okay. B, I got it. He said, well, how do I make money? He said, that's what entrepreneurs figure out. He refused to accept a paycheck. He said, the moment you accept the paycheck, your brain goes dead. As long as you're hungry, you'll think. So let's say at a high speed, if everything they teach you in school doesn't work, what if we get rid of school? Then what would happen? Would it be better if we had no educational system at all? When you go to the supermarket, you buy a carton of milk. The first thing you check for is the expiration date. You know, if the expiration date, let's say March 1st, and you know it's already July, you better not drink that milk. Sure. The same thing happens inside our brains. When we have obsolete ideas, we get obsolete results. So what's happening for most people is the idea of going to school, getting a job, working hard, saving money, getting out of debt, buying your house because it's an asset, investing for the long term, that's obsolete. So if you're not going to study, you're not going to practice and all that, then you should do what Wall Street tells you to do. 401ks, mutual funds, ETFs and all that. But that's where they're fake assets because they only make Wall Street or the City of London rich. Just watch where the cash is flowing. So what happens to entrepreneurs who go out, get their ass handed to them and survive? If you survive, you see the world differently. We all have fear. To be truthful, we all have fear. It's just how you deal with it. And, Einstein said your imagination is more important than knowledge. But knowledge empowers imagination. And what most people lack is real business knowledge, like accounting, like debt, like taxes. You've got to know that stuff. But they don't teach it in school to anybody. First of all, let's go back to what is financial education. It's not get a job, work hard, save money, and invest in a well-diversified portfolio of stock funds, mutual funds, and ETFs. That's not it. Money, the financial industry is two things to debt and taxes, debt and taxes. See, when I came back from Vietnam in January 1973, the first thing my rich dad said to me was, go to school to learn how to invest in real estate. It wasn't real estate. It was how to use debt and taxes. Debt and taxes make the rich richer. Debt and taxes make the poor and the middle class poorer. But when I make $1 million at a high speed, I keep $1 million. And the reason is because I don't make it by working for money. See, if you work for money, you're taxed. That's why lesson number 1 in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the rich don't work for money. And what we do instead is we create businesses as entrepreneurs. We acquire real estate. I don't want to invest in the stock market. Okay? So the reason is because as entrepreneurs, I have more control over my income, how much I make, and how much I pay in taxes. And because I'm an entrepreneur as well as an investor in real estate, I pay 0 tax. And yet people say, well, I want a high-paying job. Well, that's an obsolete idea. Get out of debt. That's an obsolete idea. You should learn how to get into debt, how to use debt to get rich. And they'll never teach you about taxes. The reason the 1% is way up here and the 99% are going this way is because when you print money, 2 things happen. Inflation and taxes. Go to school. What do they teach about money? Nothing. Get a job, you pay the highest taxes. Taxes, I don't pay taxes. Get out of debt. Well, money is debt after 1971. Pete, if you know your history of money, your house is not an asset. Your house is a liability. And why would I invest for the long term in the stock market when I can make my own assets? I don't need the stock market. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I create my own assets. I create my own cash flow. Financial intelligence is the ability to control cash flow. You'll pay most of your money out through taxes in your lifetime. And then they tell you to buy a house and a car. A car is an asset. No. A car is a liability. You've got insurance, gas, upkeep, and all this. So you're working for a big company like Google. You might be safe today, but you might be gone tomorrow. Whereas if you're a little startup, you might have a better chance. There's something everybody can do. Like I said, everybody can buy a 20-year silver piece. Everybody can afford $20. But will they do it? No. They'll be at Starbucks sucking it down instead. It's easy to say, I can't afford it. I'm too tired. You know you could go to the gym? No, I can't. Truth is, I'm just too lazy to go to the gym. And you play it safe and you don't introduce new risks into your life. So the people right now who are sitting at home, struggling financially, or worried about money, or unhappy, they may be making a lot of money, high speed, but unhappy with what they're doing. Well, it was probably taught to you. Your super ego was taught, get a job, work hard, or you'll never be rich. Or the rich are evil, whatever. And until you change your mindset, money won't help you. Right? Correct. And we see that with people that win the lottery, people that make more money, they still have the same problems because they have that poor man's soul. Correct? If you're poor, you'll always be poor. That's really hard for people to understand. Yeah, the money will disappear that fast. In every one of us, a high speed, there is a poor person. There's still a poor person inside me. So the real entrepreneur has an internal focus. If they fall down, they say, oh, this is good because I'm going to go up higher. You know, the average person will fall down and say, oh, I'm going to take some Prozac. Or somebody says, mistakes don't matter. Well, mistakes matter. It means you didn't know something. But a real entrepreneur, whether they fall down, they can always stand back up and go higher. No matter what happens to them, they get stronger, better, smarter, and happier. But a person with a weak internal mindset, they're so afraid of what happens. It generally happens